everyone. I'm excited to be here today to have this exciting conversation with you all about expanding the delivery landscape. I just want to tee it up with some facts as I was researching for this panel I think are important to keep in mind. So currently, global freight accounts for approximately 8% of greenhouse gas emissions. Demand for urban last mile delivery will increase by 78% by 2030, and this will lead to the addition of 36% more delivery vehicles in the world's top 100 cities. Urban deliveries will increase congestion on the roads by around 21%, and adding around 11 minutes of daily commute time for each citizen. So I'm really excited to have panelists today who are going to speak about how they're addressing this really important issue from the tech side, from the policy side, and also from the investing side. So to start, I'm just going to introduce our panelists. They're going to come out. So Lisa Colmenares is the Chief Planning Officer for Miami-Dade County. She has over 25 years of experience as a planning and transportation leader. She's the first Chief Planning Officer in Miami-Dade, Department of Transportation and Public Works. So welcome, Lisa. Next up, we have Bentzion Levinson, the founder and CEO of Heven Drones. As a former commander and Stanford University executive leadership alum, Bentzion is committed to driving meaningful change through technology. Next up, we have Olaf Sakkers, partner at RedBlue Capital. Olaf is bringing the energy today. He's an investor and advisor to numerous tech companies that are working in the transportation and mobility sectors. Most recently, he co-founded RedBlue Capital and will be speaking to the investing side of things. And last, we have John Tarin, head of global operations for KiwiBot. If you guys keep your eyes open, we might have a special guest related to John coming in and out of the session. He's leading the way for KiwiBot in the last mile robot delivery business. Previously he worked at Uber, Rocket Internet, and Jones Lang LaSalle. So welcome everyone to the panel.
Thank you.
Is my mic on? Okay, good. So I'm just going to tee us up with sort of a general landscape question for Olaf. What are you seeing broadly in the space right now? What are the big challenges that we need to address? And what are sort of the innovations that you think are the most promising in this area?
So this is a broad question, and I feel like this is also a little bit structuring for what's going to come. So I'm going to offer a framework for thinking about innovation in logistics, but I think in transportation more broadly. I wrote a book about transportation marketplaces, so I'm a little bit, I've spent some time thinking about it. I'm a little bit biased towards my own thought, understandably. The book is called Mobility Disruption Framework. You can read it at yellow.cab. End of product placement announcement. But in the book, I basically argue there's this really, I find, quite annoying framework called CASES or ACES that people throw around. Connected autonomous shared electric. I don't think it really gets to where the leverage is in technology that's coming into transportation. I think the really interesting shifts are always business model shifts because everything else dances to that tune. And that's shifting towards transportation marketplaces. What's really interesting about logistics is, for the most part, unlike passenger trips, which we take in cars that we own, it is offered as a marketplace already. It's the biggest transportation marketplace. If you think of Amazon, for instance, as a mobility company, it is truly massive, and it's offering trips. It replaces your trip to Walmart by bringing the goods to you. And that's basically what logistics is doing. So that part of the framework, which I think is the leverage part, is already quite mature in logistics, unlike for moving people. So moving freight is quite a mature transportation marketplace. But within the other three, I think, key ways of analyzing or understanding different innovations that are happening. The first is autonomy. I think what's happening in logistics around autonomy is that it's a really good use case for autonomy, especially for trucking, long-distance trucking. I don't think we're seeing much deployment. I think we're in a downspell of hype around autonomy, but people in the industry are looking at autonomy are quite serious about the potential use cases, because you basically need a truck to drive on the highway and get off the highway by itself, and then you've got a business model. So we just need to feel that safe enough. So that's autonomy. There's two more pieces. The second is electrification, but that's bigger because it's electrification and hydrogen. So there's a really big shift that's happening around different ways in which to leverage different powertrain technologies. I feel like I need to speak louder and louder to drown out the neighboring stage. And then the last is around, so there's a lot of stuff on electrification, Tesla, et cetera, but that's hard. And then hydrogen, which works quite well for longer distances, urban logistics, Amazon Rivian, things like that. So there's a bunch of stuff, a whole cluster there that we could dive into. I think some of the co-panelists on stage are combining these two things, like electrification and autonomy, for instance. And then the last is around digitization, so different ways in which software is basically replacing human functions, or software is increasing connectivity, and especially in logistics, information about goods moving in the system create a lot of business opportunities, either for marketplaces, for understanding the quality of goods and how they're moving in the network. So I'm offering that as a framework to look through things, and there's obviously a lot of stuff that's happening on all those axes. Like autonomy, I think is got a lot of possibility, but we're also in a down spell, whereas other things like digitization is just the constant march in this industry, and it's way more digitized than other sectors because the business model has been playing out for a long time.
Great. So I'd love to shift it to policy for a second. So Lisa, I would love to hear about, how is Miami-Dade County thinking about laying the foundation for these new innovations and solving the problems that you're currently seeing in logistics?
Okay, so I don't think of it as problems. I think of it as opportunities. And I think the time is now ripe. I think we've all been learning and growing as these technologies have been evolving. At the Department of Transportation and Public Works, we have been looking at our first ever transportation master plan, which is multimodal in nature. And we have been looking at how we connect all of the different modes together. And of course, delivery of goods and services is very important. Looking at freight, looking at what the trucking industry is doing, how the freight landscape is down here in Miami-Dade, and looking at the different planning areas and collaborating with our partners. We have 34 different municipalities or cities that we work with, and that's important. And then we also have a landscape where we have different land uses and different growth and different things that are happening within different planning areas. What is occurring in the beach is different that might be happening in the northeast area, in the northwest, or in the south. So we have to plan for those different first, last mile, longer trips and shorter trips within those different planning areas. So we all have to bring them together. And also from a policy side, we have to look at the collaboration that we have with our partners and looking at resiliency. We have extreme weather events here in Miami-Dade. We also have technology that we have to look at. We also have to look at that equity component and make sure that we look at the different type of users that we have. And also, as we're looking at collaborating with our partners, we have a large unincorporated Miami-Dade, and then looking at the municipalities. How do we look at these different land use development and regulations as we are looking at the state framework and the policy at the national level? So all of that is going to be important as we look at the larger framework, as my colleague Olaf here was saying, and then looking at collaborating with private and public sector. Everybody needs to have a voice as we are developing our multimodal transportation plan.
Great. So Bentzion, you are one of the folks developing a solution here. Would love to hear a little bit more about Heven drones and the role that you see drones playing in the overall landscape.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and I think the both private and public sector discussion and the different modes of autonomous systems and transportation systems is a really important discussion, right? Because it's not just about one specific mode of transportation, but how is this all going to work together? So at Heven Drones, Israeli company that recently opened an office about a mile away from here in Miami. We're focused on taking drones from just being flying cameras or flying sensors that can collect information to flying robots that can actually do tasks. Looking at the first significant task that we're tackling is logistics, right? How can we move things effectively from point A to point B? When we looked at this, we realized that the first thing that we want to solve that will really bring significant value to the ecosystem is the core capabilities of the platforms that can lift more and fly for longer. Right? If we can lift a few pounds and fly for half an hour, that's still very, very limiting. We lift our initial line of products are battery-powered drones, lift up to 75 pounds of payload. And then we realized that we were still flying with batteries for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. There is value to bring there, and there's some great use cases, but that's not scalable, right? When we're thinking about autonomous systems, swarms of drones flying, they have to get more than that. And then we got into the field of hydrogen-powered drones, so drones that can fly for hours, right? 2 hours of flight time. I think when we're kind of looking at a broader perspective of transportation, we obviously, all drove here on the roads, right? And, the big challenge of the road is that, that's it, right? That's the road, and we all have to use it, cars, trucks, people. And if we look up, besides the nice buildings out here in Miami, we really have an open sky, right? Especially the lower part of the sky, which is usually considered under 400 feet. And that's totally open for us, right? Now, obviously, there are many challenges as how is this going to work? This has to be safe, right? And, we're going to have multiple drones flying, multiple people operating these drones. How is that going to work? But at the core, I think, if we're looking at an autonomous future, right, and part of the challenges of autonomy, autonomous cars, for example, that we've been all, waiting for this to happen, but, it's not really happening at scale yet, and we haven't really seen it yet. And the challenge is obviously interacting, with the kids that are jumping into the street and the balls and the dogs, etc. So we don't have that challenge when going to the sky. We do have other challenges, right? Which is having multiple drones flying together. How do they not crash? How do we interact with the infrastructure? But there's really a lot of opportunity when we're talking about the autonomous transportation in the future to jump towards the skies.
Great. So John, would love to hear from you now about KiwiBot, which I think folks here probably have seen one or two of them bopping around. How do you feel? How do you see KiwiBots playing a role in the overall last mile delivery? And tell us a little bit more about the company.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us here. As my colleagues just mentioned, it's not only about our last mile delivery robots in the scene, right? It's thinking about a future of having other types of robots and free carbon emission products helping us, right, to deliver logistics. Actually, we started in 2017 at UC Berkeley. We were trying, our founders, Felipe and Sergio, were trying to find a solution to actually make deliveries accessible for everybody. That the price of a delivery is pretty high at this moment, and during the pandemic time, the same thing happened, right? Even prices got a little bit higher. So what we envisioned at KiwiBot is that we were able to reduce 65% of that cost of the delivery, right? So we are working on having deliveries for everybody. Our mission is to have a future of carbon-free deliveries, and we're contemplating creating a network of robots that will live with humans and with other robots and be able to have logistics, technology, and deliveries for all. That's our biggest mission right now.
Great. And so a quick follow-up to that for you. You have these out in the world right now, which is you're seeing how people are interacting with them, and you're operating on campuses. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like, what some use cases have been?
Yes, of course. Right now, at this moment, we're over 30 campuses in the United States. Some of our public schools, some are private schools. We're utilizing a number of 15 to 30 robots per school. We have two big partnerships at this time. One is Alexa and the other one is Grubhub. They're providing the application inside of the schools. As you may know, most of the schools have their own dining app tool that we could utilize. So what we're doing at this moment is trying to expand that footprint into 100 more universities at this time for next semester. The biggest challenge is actually manufacturing so many KiwiBots at this time, right? The investment is key. And as you all know, this time it's a little bit complicated to be obtaining investments. The interesting part is that the contracts we've managed to sign before we even started has to open a lot of different doors for us to obtain investment, right, and to continue to build our KiwiBots. On a day-to-day basis, we've done over 300,000 deliveries, pre-carbon emission, reduced 150,000 miles of probably drivers coming into the campuses, right? It is a controlled and safe place for us to have our KiwiBots at this time. We are looking to expand outside. We are expanding to Saudi Arabia, to the NEOM Sustainable City. So there's a whole bunch of different plans for us to expand our operations and bring deliveries to everyone.
So, Bentzion, I want to stick with the technologies for a sec. So, earlier when we were talking, you mentioned, early in development, you were working on these sort of COVID-related deliveries. I'd love to hear more about that. And then also just to give the audience a sense of, where you are at in your development. You're working with you're moving with hydrogen. How is that going? And what do you see sort of the needs, the infrastructure needs to get your business off the ground?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of questions there, and I'll try to break them down. So, we focused originally on how can we lift more payload than the market knows how to lift with battery-powered drones. We actually started more on the homeland security side, which has a lot less regulations, and therefore it's easier to transport systems in operations. And founded the company in August 2019. 4 or 5 months go by, and COVID hits. Which is a challenge of its own. But pretty early on, a couple months, the Israeli health department decided this is a great opportunity to start testing drones. And we ended up getting picked to lead a program where we transported COVID tests from different buildings in a very large hospital compound. Now, that was amazing. The trick or the magic there was that they basically closed the sky for us. So, up to 400 feet in that whole area, that was for us to use. So technology works, and it's pretty straightforward. The challenge, obviously, in scaling this up is interacting with the larger, airspace and the other operators in that field. So that's kind of a big challenge. As I mentioned, so our original products focus on battery-powered drones about 10-mile radius, and there's obviously a lot of applications there. But we're focused on scale and how scale is going to work. Even having to come back every 25 minutes, right, to change your batteries, that is really challenging. So that's what got us to push us into the source or search for a more effective energy source, and we got the hydrogen. Our advantage kind of positioning is that we are the exclusive provider of hydrogen drones for the Israeli government. That gave us this significant head start, and we finished our initial project about 6 months ago. So flying for over 100 minutes, that was with a 10-pound payload. And we're now scaling that out into a product line that goes from 50 pounds up to 75 pounds of payload with a 2-hour flight time. So that is the fully commercialized hydrogen product line is coming out in a couple months.
Can I ask a question on behalf of the audience, or the skeptics in the audience that are probably sitting there and asking this question in their head? I just want to verbalize it because I think it might be more fun. Which is, we've been hearing about drones in the sky and drones on the sidewalk for a long time. I met a company called Starship 6 years ago, I think. The founders from Skype, basically doing the same thing, KiwiBots. Same strategy, not exactly, focus on campuses, whatever. Drones have been around for a long time. You might have started just before COVID, but these ideas have been out there, and many companies have raised capital and then failed. Why hasn't this worked? This sounds great at first glance and then doesn't work, doesn't scale. Is there something different about what you're doing versus all the other things that have already come? And isn't this just going to fail in the same way?
Yeah, so that's a great question that we ask ourselves often, right? Where is the missing piece that has to come together? I think the answer is it's not one missing piece, right? So taking a step back, the goal that we have to achieve for this to make sense is, first of all, on the economic side, it has to make sense, right? And, if we think of a DoorDash driver, which could be a 17-year-old driving a car, we have to get cheaper than that, right? And the only way to get cheaper to that is if we have multiple autonomous drones and working where we have one operator, it's called one-to-many in the industry, we have one operator commanding, let's say, 100 drones, right? And therefore, the price per operation is much cheaper. So the goal is where autonomous drones can fly and can save us money, right? That's really what we have to achieve. I think there's kind of a few different sectors that have to get to a maturity level to achieve that. Number one is technology. what's clear to everyone here is that safety is the number one priority, right? And just like we all want to make sure that, the Boeing plane or Airbus plane that I'm going to fly out later is going to be safe, right, and won't crash into someone's house. Same thing with the drone. It's an aircraft, right? And we're not talking just on, hey, can the drone fly from point A to point B? It's, what happens if there's two drones flying in the sky, right? So a technology called detect and avoid, and making sure that drones won't crash into each other. Now, what happens if you have emergency landing, right? And all
So
these
shouldn't I bet on him because he doesn't have to worry about killing people?
Right. So I think the answer, he can answer that, but I think the answer is that, and this is kind of the second stage, but just to focus on the drone. So it's a combination of the technology that's been maturing, and it's not only one company; it's an industry, right? Different sub technologies that all come together, and this is happening significantly over the past decade, and COVID has definitely pushed this forward. The second aspect is the regulation, right? If you looked, 5-10 years back, and you asked the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority, hey, what is the plan? What do I have to do drone operations at scale? You wouldn't get a clear answer. Today, you get an answer, or 80% cooked answer, and they say, look, we have to prove that the technology works and it's scaled up, but the FAA is, really, really thinking about this and building out, a plan for that. And I think it's also public acceptance of this technology, right? The thought of having drones and multiple drones flying in our skies, we as an industry have to, slowly convince the world that it works. And the way we've done this as a company is that we've been focusing on other use cases that we're not flying over people, right? And this can be the homeland security space, agriculture space, solar farms, etc. Maturing the technology, proving that it works, and then slowly scaling out to the other world. I think the second part, and this really connects to land robots, right, is that it's not that drones is going to solve all of our issues, right? It's really a connectivity between, this future mode of robotics, of autonomous systems that will connect. These really cool robots here are amazing, and great examples like working within buildings, right? If you live on the 15th floor of a building, right, or you work in the 15th floor of a building, it's really cool that I can get a drone that can fly across the city, but how are you going to get your package, right? And these are questions that we're dealing with. So I think, multi-motor, multi-systems, ground, air, working together is the future that we have to get to, we're going to get to. And I think, the way to get there is that to focus on high-value use cases for each one of us. So they're focusing on campuses. That's amazing, right? Because there's great value to there. We're focused on healthcare delivery, right? If you're high-value use case, focusing within also a campus, for example, that specific example, and scaling that out. So adding value to customers, proving that it works, and slowly scaling that out is what we're going to see. But I think there's no really other choice, right? If you think about where the world is going, and where we 100 years back and how the world is evolving, there's no question that we're moving towards autonomous systems. And I think we're going to have to just overcome the challenges, right, to get there.
Yes, I'm going to...
You can't use like half of his excuses. They don't apply.
No, I'm just going to resume this in 3 words. Level of autonomy, okay? Regulations are key, and of course integration, right? Those are the keys to our success at this point right now. You did mention our competitor, Starship. Their robots probably cost 4 times what ours cost, and their integration at least as much as well. So we are a better product for campuses at this moment because of costs. And you could see the KiwiBots there. They're so cute compared to our competitors. So that's another fun factor that makes us be in the top spot in the competition right now. But the level of autonomy, level 4 that we're
But the question isn't a comparative thing of like, are you better than Starship or not, or are your robots cuter, and then like parading them in front of us. It's like, why isn't this industry taken off? Like, why aren't we seeing these things at scale? I'm an investor. I'd love this stuff to take off. I just focus on mobility. I'm screwed if nothing takes off, right?
Right.
I want this whole industry to take off. What's stopping it?
Well, the high cost of developing the technology, it's one of the blockers right now, and the regulations. We're having conversations all over the states, but we are inside of campuses. That's like the easiest way that we can make our investors actually acknowledge that this works, right? Because outside of the cities, the infrastructure is not there yet in some places, or the regulation is not there. And that's going to take a lot of time, right? But inside of the universities and the schools, it's different, right? They actually give us the permits, right? So it's very easy. So it's like the best way for us to actually demonstrate that this is something that is going to work and it is the future of delivery. And one important point is the technology. You know, our robots are level 4 right now. That's something very important for us. That's going to help us reduce the cost, the people behind the operations, everything. So that's key, right? That's the magic we need to make this scale and for all of the investors to see our P&L and numbers and say, wow, you're making money.
I love for folks that are streaming this right now, as this conversation was unfolding, 4 KiwiBots marched in here to help make the case for you. So I think this is a good segue to Lisa. And you know, you heard regulations come up. What advice would you have? You know, or I guess to reframe, how can Miami-Dade help better lay the foundation here? And a second question, and part of that is, you know, you have a really complicated job and that you need to get community input too. And you need to make sure that people are accepting these technologies and are open to them. And so would love to hear through how your office is dealing with that.
Yes, and one of the things that I heard from Bentzion was infrastructure. And then, you know, we are the Department of Transportation and Public Works, and I think having that infrastructure that is appropriate to accommodate the different technologies is key. And then working with different private partners and how we can help you and having those conversations is really important. I know that partnering with the universities is important because you could pilot these, and then those lessons learned, then we can apply them to pilots that then we can work with our municipal partners or with us, with the county, and implement these. Implement these in the short term that then we could implement in our projects in the longer term, in our capital programs. So I think that's one of the things that is going to be important. And one of the other things I believe that I think we maybe very briefly or not discussed is, and I see our chief of administration, our deputy sitting in the audience. We have had some challenges in hiring operators for bus, but I know that the freight industry was having the same challenges in hiring operators. So I think that these autonomous technologies help in that space. So maybe these deliveries for that last mile, first last mile, is key, because then maybe you know, you could use the operators that you do have and make it more efficient and effective. So how do we use these technologies to supplement and complement those first last mile deliveries? So all of these things are going to be key as we're trying to implement these policies, and then looking at working with our universities in those research and space, and what are those results of those research as we are implementing those policies. So a lot of these things are important, and I think we've touched upon those. And then what are the lessons learned in the different areas? I know that we've heard some challenges on the, for example, in the very densely urban areas and how these are being delivered. Like there's constrained space and there's competition for space. And I know that our partners in Miami and in Miami Beach are working to make the space more adaptable, that it could be used for, you know, for that curbside management and things like this. These are all very important as we are developing our policies to implement all of these technologies.
And then, so the community piece too, just want to stick with you for a second. So I know that that's a function that your office oversees. And so how are you incorporating community input into the master plan and the broader work that this fits into?
Correct. And as we're working with we have not started the community piece yet. At this time, we're only working with the municipal technical staff, but the next piece is that input with the community. And one of the things that our municipal partners did mention is that they want to make sure that we have a good educational component to make the community aware of some of the safety concerns for different things. We are working a lot on, for example, our Vision Zero, which is reducing fatalities and severe injuries on our network, and that applies to all of the different modes, bike, ped, freight, transit, and so forth. So we want to make sure that all of these different aspects, including technology, resiliency, and all of the different modes, we incorporate that educational aspect, and then we could get that input from the community on what are the needs that they are prioritizing. So we can prioritize our goals, objectives, and then our measures as we are developing our plan. So all of that is going to be key. And the same way that we're working in the different planning areas, we're going to also be doing our public input by planning areas, so we can kind of have it in smaller areas, so we can kind of capture the different needs of the community.
Great. So Olaf, I want to take it back to fundraising for a minute. So I think we've heard throughout the panels here, and even in here, like the challenging environment these companies are in right now. And at the same time, there are tailwinds with the IRA, but there's also just real lack of capital. So how do you feel about the state of things right now and the landscape and these opportunities for these startups? What's going to happen?
So firstly, just on the market's bad right now. Mostly because, I don't know if I'm saying stuff that's like totally obvious to everybody and they're just going to roll their eyes, but mostly because the cost of capital has gone up. As the interest rate has been stepped up, that means that the public markets immediately corrected, but the private markets take much longer to correct because valuations are priced every 18 months or so. And the flow of capital to venture capital happens in blocks. So there's a big delay function that's basically playing out in the private market, and companies really don't want to do down rounds because that's quite painful. It's a very naughty KiwiBot interrupting us. So the effect of that is quite painful because it's got a kind of backlash effect, but it's not evenly distributed. It's not super clear. So that's just like the current macro environment right now. I do say that with a bit of an asterisk because I think for the most part the world has become richer and richer, and there's more and more capital for smart founders. And maybe it's a little bit harder than it was 2 years ago, but like I think if you look back to your parents' generation, like there just wasn't a thing like venture capital available for smart founders to build businesses. So I don't think we should like cry a river about this stuff. Like I think it's cyclical and there are bad moments and good moments. But that's the landscape, and companies will die and people will lose their jobs, and then it will be this other side of the destruction part of creative destruction. And destruction hurts. Like, life involves death, and death is bad. I do want to say one more thing about money that I think it's a little saucy, so I hopefully that's fun as well. But for mobility in general, I think there's a big elephant in the room, in America in particular. And that's that there is a lot of money. You mentioned the IRA. There's a lot of money going towards one thing, and that is car ownership. If you own a car, you don't pay for your parking. Everybody else who doesn't drive a car, who goes to your church and pays church dues, or goes to the hospital, or goes to a store, and especially buys or rents an apartment in a real estate complex, they have to also foot the bill to pay for the parking space, which is just bundled into the cost of everything. And cities like Miami, like every city in America, except for a few now that are starting to change that, mandate a minimum amount of parking space. So if you fly, when you leave Miami, if you're visiting, or next time you fly over an American city, about 20 to 30% of the urban real estate is just dedicated towards parking space. And that's just a bonus, a freebie that goes to car drivers that doesn't go to anybody else. And then all the roads and all the other things. So when creative regulators that are coming along and looking at this problem and saying, how do we create innovation? You've already created a massive subsidy where America, a land of freedom and choice, suddenly takes away your choice. If you want to send your kids to a good school, you can't send them to a good school unless you own a car. If you want to shop at Costco where the prices are better than at your local grocery store, you can't get there without a car. If you want a better job, you can't get there without a car. There's only one way. And there's a big barrier to having that car, which creates massive inequality, etc. So if you're an innovator that's coming with a solution that isn't, I want to sell you a car, and that car is getting bigger and fatter and more dangerous, an SUV, like a Hummer EV, or even a Tesla is a massive car, and if it hits you, you die. those are the cars that are getting $7,500 subsidies through the IRA. But if you buy an e-bike from Rad Power Bikes, that $7,500 could buy you like 40 Rad Power bikes. Like, it's crazy. I mean, 7.5 and the batteries in it, whatever. Like, it's way more that you could do with that money, and yet you get nothing, zilch. Like, you're just covering the whole cost of that Rad Power bike instead of getting like a 10% subsidy towards a large electric car. And that's the landscape that any creative founder is on in the sector. They're fighting against a massive headwind, and that is massive, massive subsidization towards an industry that creates massive congestion in our cities, kills 40,000 Americans every year in car crashes, causes massive emissions. It's the largest and hardest sector to decarbonize, causes air pollution that shortens people's lives. Like, everything about this has negative externalities, and yet we just keep going along as if this doesn't exist and like kind of putting it to the side. So that's my other thought about funding besides the current market environment.
Got it. It's definitely directly aligned with you on all of that. And, at Elemental, we're definitely looking to all of our investments. We're trying to focus on how to get people out of single occupancy vehicle trips. Like, that is a focus, because it's so much bigger than just decarbonization. It's about safety. It's about equity of public space. So we have a few more minutes before I want to open up for questions. I think, we have an opportunity. Lisa is a captive audience on the stage for us right now. And you all, in different capacities are working through, how you're going to use public space. And so I would like to hear from all three of you, if you had, something you could request from Lisa and Miami-Dade County, and this could apply to lessons you're learning in Saudi Arabia or Israel or other places, what are those sort of government support functions that will really help you get off the ground and help support your work? I'll start with you, John.
Okay, perfect. So Lisa, thank you for what you just told us. We've been doing some campaigns with the Knight Foundation, actually speaking to the community. That's helping us. That was helping us a lot for people to understand how the KiwiBots or the robots or new technology could coexist with people, right? Something new. Some of them are afraid. So that's the size of our KiwiBots and those cute faces. They have a reason, right? That's why they're small and they look like a small pet, right? It's for people to be more familiar with and friendly with the robots. So that's key for us, right? To have a space that perhaps through you we could reach the community and teach them, right? How to behave or how the robots behave in their world, because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're not trying to take over the world for sure, right? We just want to have more convenience for people everywhere. So that's key. And well, of course, to have these robots on the streets, we're going to need your help with regulations, with telling us what to do, what not to do. And we could help you as well, right? We have a whole lot of information. The KiwiBots could map up the city. We can know where there's illegal dumping, where's danger zones, danger in a crossing. We could provide useful information as well. So we're just open for anything that comes our way, and we're happy to help you with the technology in the city and all the regulators as well.
Thank you for that. And I think that's going to be crucial as we are working with the community with technology and new technologies and how to work with how these are being incorporated in our city. I mean, even ourselves, when we're in downtown Miami, you can see the bots going in around our office. So just working with the community, and we appreciate that, you working with us, and we welcome you as we are going out to the community with our master planning efforts. Thank you.
Olaf, do you want? I mean, you made the case earlier about cars, but I mean, on behalf of the companies that you work with, is there anything else you think Miami-Dade should think about as they're building these structures?
Yeah, so I'm going to say this first in personal terms and then from like a top-down perspective. I went for a run this morning. In Florida, like many cities, in Miami, like many cities in America, I fear for my life as a vulnerable road user. Literally, like you go through certain intersections and it's just dangerous. And there's another way in which you get treated as a second-class citizen, as a runner or walker or something, which is you have to press a beg button every time you want to cross an intersection. Like, hey, cars, you get to go, but like, we're not going to give you a light unless you press this button specifically asking for it. And I think they're just basic things you can do to build more cohesive, integrated pedestrian infrastructure, but much more so micromobility infrastructure that enables these kinds of things. Like, you're using pedestrian space for the most part, I think, but bike lanes are also good for enabling all sorts of innovation that isn't just car space. And I think if you've got a vision of like what you want to create, you can create an integrated web of infrastructure that's really protected and safe. And unless you have that, you're not going to see meaningful modal shift. And there's great examples. Go visit Amsterdam or Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a city with 49% of people that commute by bicycle. They're much healthier, they're much happier, and they're also much safer. People have better life outcomes when they're able to exercise. But unless you have a vision for how you're going to build a whole integrated network of infrastructure, and I know it's much harder from a political perspective, and there isn't buy-in for most places in America. This is something that citizens can also demand, but I think this is something that really needs to be a focus area and a vision, and unless you build out the network, you're not going to have transformation.
We welcome your feedback and your thoughts as we're developing our Vision Zero action plan. And I'm originally from South America, so I used to commute by train or walking and be a pedestrian. So I understand, right? And I have family from New York and London, so we do want to make sure that we are working on developing our SMART program, which is high rapid transit in Miami. So we want to make sure that we are incorporating your thoughts as well. We want to make sure that we're incorporating everybody's thoughts into our developing our multimodal plan. That's the idea.
And I think in particular,
Thank you.
e-bikes are a game
Yes.
changer. Because American cities are spread out, but they shorten the distances.
Thank you, Olaf.
Bentzion, how about you?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think amazing points said, and I think for us, we obviously have the core regulation part. If the drone is not safe, if there's any risk that, or besides 0.000 whatever, that someone can get injured, that's our responsibility. But I think beyond that, and to make meaningful change, we have to invest in infrastructure. We have to kind of change the way we think about things, as Olaf mentioned here. And I'll draw you a very short but amazing vision. Imagine we had these drone hubs, right? So imagine different areas. Take a parking lot. You have a 20-foot container. In this 20-foot container, we can have drones, multiple drones going up and down. They're launching autonomously, landing autonomously, and they can reach any place in a 5-mile radius, right? In about 5 minutes, right? So what you can then achieve is that, of course, the regular day-to-day things that we all enjoy, like food, groceries, etc., we could all enjoy by having drones do this autonomously. But then we can also have other things, because once I can launch a drone and be anywhere in the 5-mile radius in 5 minutes, if there's also a car accident or a fire happening, right, I can have that first responder and be able to at least see what's going on, and in some cases respond to that, right? Now, there's a lot of moving parts that goes into having and allowing this future, and I think as you and anyone else really thinks about the future, it's really taking this into account and having a vision and working with us, the industry, to make that vision, a reality. We're doing this because we believe that this will make the world a better place and a better place for all of us. And we see, how today it's messed up, right? Today things really are crooked, and I think autonomy is a way to get there, and all the other forms of micromobility and other aspects. So it's just having that that vision and working together, right, to get to that vision.
Thank you for that. I think I've always, when you're sitting on, for example, even 95 Express, and you see there's an accident and the first responders cannot get there, and you can save a life because the first responders can get there easier. So we have the same vision, right? That's important and critical. And then people can get to where they need to get to their jobs, or to pick up their kids at school, or somebody who's cutting grass can get to the next job quicker. So we're all trying to achieve the same goal and work together towards that goal. Thank you for sharing that.
Amazing.
Great. So I think we have a few minutes for questions from the audience, if anyone has any. Yeah.
There's some swag inside of the KiwiBots. If you like to take any, please do.
Thank you. My question is for Olaf. Olaf, you seem to be the most relatable when it comes down to seeing both sides. I briefly spoke to John about the KiwiBot, didn't speak to him about the drones, but from a consumer aspect, especially, we have a delivery company as well, but have you guys done the market research to actually see, you know, what are the deliverable products that they actually want? Because I think if you, like Lisa said, get the community more involved, then you'll have it scale faster because they'll understand the need for what the product is for. A lot of times as a consumer, when we hear robots or bots, it's like, you know, we're going to shy away from that. So maybe, you know, tweaking the language a little bit where it's more relatable to the actual customer would probably bring forth more people, you know, susceptible to actually accepting it, because delivery exists, right? You have Amazon, you know, they deliver products and stuff like that. I think they tried the drone before at some point. But when you have an autonomous world that's changing, I think if you, like Lisa said, get the community more involved with understanding the need for where the world is actually going, then you'll get more people involved actually to use the products, because I think it's a really good product. I think it's just more so finding out from the consumer aspect of what they would need it for.
Yeah, so happy to try and take that question. I think your main question was, what is the best use case for this kind of product that then the consumer adoption will be up to a certain threshold that the business itself becomes viable, right? Because I thought your point about number of operators per drone is kind of critical. So the core thing that's happening here is most of the use cases that you can use delivery drones for, and also the flying drones and the ground drones like these, is for food delivery, which is pretty light in weight and high in value. So people are willing to pay, say, $20, $40 for one particular item. It's much harder for Amazon package type deliveries where you've got one van going around, but the customer doesn't need the item super quickly. So that's, if that makes sense as a way to segment. All of this is within the realm of last mile delivery rather than middle mile and first mile, which is what big trucks are doing for Walmart and Amazon, etc. So most of the innovation that's happening is in this last mile segment where most of the complexity is and most of the spend is. And then the question is, what are the use cases and the environments? Because it's also like what geofence makes sense for doing it. But the basic arbitrage that's playing out here is an arbitrage on human labor versus autonomy, where the autonomy isn't pure autonomy, but it's blended with teleoperators for the most part, either operating the flying drones or the ground drones, and then trying to reduce the number of human operators that need to jump in order to fix certain use cases. As that number goes down, the number of people that are used per delivery, the ROI, the cost savings go up, and the viability of the product goes up. And then there's a few edge case problems, like how do you actually get the person to open it and use it and accept it and want to use the app, which are much more technical, or how do you prevent theft or vandalism of things, or these funny videos of, you know, the robots going into a manhole engine just disappearing, and then you've like lost delivery. So there's a whole lot of technical troubleshooting in order to get it, but the main problem is getting it to work often enough and reliably enough, and better than a human. And the reality is people are relatively cheap and good at doing those last mile deliveries, and there's a lot of price pressure. And that's why you're focusing on the ratio and the reliability, but it's still quite hard to get these systems to perform better than humans, basically.
I agree. Thank you.